Ladies and gentlemen, you see these four absolutely handsome and beautiful faces on your screen. You know what that means. It's the weekend. It is time for the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast here. Very quickly becoming the favorite new NFL podcast for the sports consumer. We're sweeping the nation. We've become popular. The Welsh are starting to love us again. It's only been a good time here recently on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. As always, one of your hosts, one of your consigliaries that will lead you on through this journey of football and chaos on a weekly basis. Myself, Iceman Jared. As always, joining us, our whole group. He always has a new prop every single week. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, free for advertising because we will gladly be advertising shows on this podcast. Sandoval is here on the top row with me. Didn't actually plan that out. It's just how it is. And honestly, I think Sandoval being on the top row is going to be a consistent basis going forward. But in the meanwhile, the actual other speaking hosts on this podcast, one of them joining me right under me on the screen, who has the best background by far. And I have actually this week, I might actually technically have the worst background because color clashing and light. Justin is with me. Justin, how are we doing, brother?
Doing great, Jared. Sandoval, good to see you. Looks like you had a rough night.
rough night or good night? It kind of depends. Little. Did he accidentally eat some eucalyptus leaves instead of regular leaves?
I wasn't watching him, so I'm sorry. I wasn't watching him. I don't know.
And so the neglectful owner of Sandoval for last night, ladies and gentlemen, the man who is the best ranter on the internet now, quickly becoming a fan favorite. At one point, he had a blood feud with the Welsh, but I think it's slowly becoming a friendship. And I think we know who he's going to be rooting for in this year's World Cup, which is, funny enough, happening in the winter because corruption and greed. Podfather Rick is with us. Rick, how are we doing? Is Sandoval okay?
Yeah, I mean, Sandoval's fine. Yeah, so I ended up watching Wales play Uganda last night in table tennis to further my my love and support for the Welsh here. And I'm wearing Wales red, as you can clearly see, because they beat the Ugandans in table tennis, which, I mean, I'll be honest with you, isn't really that difficult to do because, it's table tennis. So, done. So, but yeah, no, Sandoval's fine. I think he ended up going. Justin's wearing a Fish T-shirt. I think Sandoval snuck out and went to a Fish concert because I've heard those things can get a little crazy.
Brand new.
Yeah, it's a very nice T-shirt. It's very nice. Yeah. But you can agree with me, Justin. Those concerts get a little crazy sometimes, I believe.
I've seen some things.
Yeah.
I've seen some things. That's a good way to describe concert going, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. So with everything aside, and we know Sandoval's good, especially with our usual weekly segment that'll be coming up here in a few moments. As we have said before, this is it, ladies and gentlemen. This is the creme de la creme, the coup de grace of the weekly divisional episodes. This is the final Sports Agents of Chaos podcast NFL division preview, where we're going to go through the final division we haven't gone through, which is the NFC West this week. We went through the AFC West last week. Amazing episode. I think the best division preview that we've done yet. If you want to go back and watch that, of course, you could go back on Twitter as well as the YouTube channel. We're on Bunts and Bruises and see, all the takes we had, what our thoughts were. Who did we have in fourth place? Who did we have dethroning the Chiefs? Did any of us have the Chiefs in first place? Who had the Chiefs lower than everyone else? At the end of the day, which one of us thought that the LA Chargers were going to outdo the Undertaker's undefeated WrestleMania streak? One of us projected that, essentially. For you to figure that out, you got to go back and watch last week's episode. This week's episode, we're going to go through a division that is still relatively stacked, not as it was going into last season, but this is still very much a three-team division where all three of these teams three of the four teams, I say all three like I'm forgetting the last one, but three of these four teams can make the playoffs in 1 year.
You weren't wrong, Jared. You weren't wrong. True. We know this.
To be fair, I just want to be fair. I like the city that we're going to bury their team here in a bit, but we're going to go through this division that has three playoff caliber teams in it, like they were last season, and home of the Super Bowl champions as well. We're doing that as usual. Of course, we're going to end the episode with one of the best parts of the show, which is Rick's usual rant podium. Rant's usual Rick as well. That could be a nice inverse tagline, but Rick's ranting podium is going to be the case. And full disclosure, while we go through the Seattle Seahawks, he's definitely going to be working on the rants because the Seahawks don't deserve that much of his time. He doesn't doubt it. But before that, ladies and gentlemen, per usual, before we really dive into the chaos, we need to start out right. We got to start with a little bit of an appetizer. And this always starts chaos because, I'm cool with it whenever we get it right. Rick is jealous of Sandoval completely. So we'll see if Sandoval will save us this week in his, less than 100% state. Justin, the next great American TV guest show host, which I watched some Jeopardy yesterday, Justin. I think you're in line in the future for Jeopardy one day, but that's just my opinion.
I'll
Take it away. Yeah, take it away, my brother. We start with a rousing round of NFL trivia.
So we went with some individual stats on defense last week, and two great players have some really good records. And now I'm gonna focus on a little bit more of a negative record. Since expanding to the 16 game season, what team has given up the most points in a season? I'm sorry, the least amount of points in a season. So the best defense. Misread my own question.
It happens.
Rick, you're muted, Rick.
Rick, you're muted. Do you know that?
I'm working on my rants. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the Seahawks question. It's not. We're not at the Seahawks yet, so unmute. So at least
I mean, it could be the Seahawks. You don't know.
The question is not. It's since 1978. What team defense has allowed the least amount of points?
Okay, so
actually, reason that I did that, I was somehow combining two questions on my thing.
Oh, well, good to know. So least amount of points in a 16 game season. So immediately two teams come to mind, and I think Rick would agree with these two teams, and that's the 85 Bears. And it was the 2000 Ravens that ended up winning the Super Bowl, I think, or 99 Ravens. So like what?
2000 Ravens.
Yeah, it's 2000 Ravens. So to me, those are the first two that immediately come to mind. Like I think those are the defenses that every single team nowadays gets compared to. Like when Seattle's Legion of Boom came in, or the no-fly zone in Denver, like those defenses were compared to the 85 Bears and the 2000 Ravens. So I think it has to be one of those two teams. Rick, before we officially give answers, like, are there any other teams that I'm maybe like are slipping from my memory?
I'm trying to think of other teams that had incredible defenses. I mean, Legion of Boom 2013 could be a possibility. I feel like maybe a Pittsburgh. Maybe a Pittsburgh defense potentially could have had, because I mean, Dick LeBeau's defenses were always stacked. They were always stout when it came to giving up points. Maybe even the Patriots defense, like maybe the perfect season Patriots. I know they had one game where the Giants took it in the limit in the regular season, but I feel like they could have been solid enough. But I think it is the 85 Bears or the 85 Bears, the 2000 Ravens, maybe the 98-99 Broncos. Bill Romanowski maybe is a possibility too. But I don't really know for certain. And those are just teams that only won Super Bowls. There could be a team that was really, really good, but just maybe it's the 91 Bills for all we know.
Or maybe this is a dark horse team. I just know like their defense had a lot of great players. Maybe because you got to think in part of the low points allowed, it's got to be the record. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers that ended up slaughtering that Raiders team in the Super Bowl. Like there were great names on the defense, but how great were they in the regular season is just what I'm like. I don't remember. Were they the top seed or second seed in the NFC?
I think that's a fair shot. I think you want another team that could be a surprise. Again, I said Bill Belichick had some really, Patriots had some really good seasons. He was with the Browns. Maybe the Browns defense back when he was, heading them up had some pretty solid efforts there. I mean, again, like it's just there's a lot of things, but I feel like we're talking Bears or Ravens because everybody else is speculative. Right. I mean, I could even throw out the 2000 Tennessee Titans or the 99 Tennessee Titans,
Right.
But I feel like we know the Bears and the Ravens the best because when you say 16 game season and you take out the Steel Curtain, the Purple People Eaters, you take out, those really tough defenses. And while I want to say the Sack Exchange might have had some high-powered leverage in the 80s for the Jets, they also had to face Dan Marino a couple times. They also had to face a really potent AFC West, and so I think you're looking at Bears or Ravens.
Yeah, since we get two guesses a pop, I think we each use our first guess here. So I'm going to go with the 2000 Ravens.
There ain't no fooling you guys. Since 1978, the 2000 Ravens are the lowest, have allowed the fewest points per game in a season per game at 10.3.
There we go. There we go.
Great.
Just so you know, the 85 Bears were 6th on this list.
Really?
0.4.
How many of the teams in between did we name while we were going through? That is the question.
You named 2 of the teams in between, actually.
Okay. So who were there?
The 2000 Bucks
Mm-hmm.
were 12.3, and the 2000 Titans were 11.9.
Wow.
The other teams that you missed in that top 6 were the 78 Steelers, 12.2, and the 86 Bears at 11.7.
Wow, there are 2 Bears teams on there.
There's actually 3 Bears teams in the top 10.
That's wild. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, they were the monsters of the Midway for a reason. Like,
Well, yeah. I forgot how far back the 16-game season was because you said the 78 Steelers. I forgot how far back that was.
78 was the first 16-game season.
Wow.
perfect timing.
Okay.
Perfect timing.
Not bad.
That was that like the end of the Steel Curtain essentially? Like that was their final season, or one of?
Remember.
It might have been. It might have been the end of it. Yeah, because I feel like that was you talking about like Bradshaw and Lynn Swan and all that. I feel like that was kind of like the end of it. From there was that run.
So you could say that was the curtain call for the Steel Curtain.
Funny. Yeah.
I did it just for the joke.
Of course you did. Well, yeah, because I mean, I'm just looking at it now. So Ernie Holmes, who was on the Steel Curtain, got traded in '78. Dwight White retired in 1980.
What a name!
I know, right? And Mean Joe Green retired in '81. So they had hit their prime in the '70s, and they were done by the end of it. So that makes the most sense that was kind of the issue there. There's one other guy, but Lee Greenwood was the other guy, not the God Bless the USA singer, but the other Lee Greenwood. So that he was, I think he was done in the '80s too. So makes sense.
Well, that is another round of trivia that we have gone through, boys. And Rick, we didn't even need Sandoval this week. Look at that.
I think he's fine with that. I mean, I'm just looking at him. I think he's fine with that.
Yeah, I think this week he was hoping we would get it.
I'm gonna have to bring the heat next week.
Oh, he's threatening.
He's got more bullets in the chamber. He's gonna come out next week.
Of course he does.
He's just gonna be like Arnold Schwarzenegger in one of his movies and just like machine gun to his hip and just go.
Yep.
Too sweet, boys. Too sweet. But we're not done with the fun and games quite yet before we get to the football, ladies and gentlemen. Because like I said, the best game show host in America shows off his range. That was trivia. Now we have a little bit of fun. NFL, would you rather, ladies and gents? Justin, take us away.
All right. Well, since it is NFC West week, I was sitting down and I was thinking about our teams, and I got to thinking, who do you think is more likely to return to the Super Bowl this year? The Rams or the Bengals?
The unpredictability of the AFC aside, because I know we talked about that last week with as Denver could probably make a Super Bowl before Green Bay does. I just think that the Rams are just too stacked. I think the Rams are just too stacked to really discount them. And we know how hard it is to go back and repeat. We know how difficult that is, but can you honestly tell me that there's one flaw that you would see that's a fatal flaw or a fatal error in the Rams that, push comes to shove, would they not be able to return to the Super Bowl? Maybe not win it, but at least return to the Super Bowl in that regard. Don't get me wrong, the Bengals were the darlings last year. They were the surprise team to make it. The Rams, it was kind of like an expected. And the fact that Sean McVay in maybe 6 seasons has been there twice and won it once, and he's had teams that have been really good all throughout. I mean, I know it's shorter than 6, but it's going to probably be that point where he's going to have that 6 seasons, 4 playoff appearances or whatever. That's impressive for a guy who is becoming probably maybe the best coach in all of the NFL. So I think for me, not even diving into the players because we know the key points, but the Rams I think are just more likely to make it back. I'd love to see the Bengals go back, but I just think it's the Rams an obvious one for me is the Rams.
Well, I
Yeah.
would agree they have the easier path, but that Bengals offense is stacked. That there's hard
It
to
is.
argue that there's a better offense in the league. Jerry, do you have a
Yeah.
different opinion?
No, I was honestly just going to say that. I really agree with Rick. I think that, you know, you say the points of the roster. I think that needs no more detail. I just think Rick said it, like Rick didn't go into detail, but the depth of the AFC versus the depth of the NFC, like both, and also like you got to think about it. The Rams have a much better chance of getting a first round bye as well than the Bengals, and I think that's going to end up making a big difference. Now, I know technically last season both the teams that got first round byes lost in the divisional round, but do you really think it's like, depending on the matchup, do you think that team is going to be able to beat the Rams in LA? That team making a run to make it back to the Super Bowl? Like, it's, I know we like to say the NFL is unpredictable sometimes, but I would put my money on the Rams to definitely make it past the divisional round, and so that means it's just one game to get at least back to the NFC Championship game. I think the Rams are in a much better spot to come back, and just the Bengals, it's going to be tough because you have literally the entirety of the AFC West to deal with. You have a great team, the AFC East, and the Bills, that a lot of people have them pegged as the preseason Super Bowl favorite now to come out on the AFC side at least. You have the in your own division, you have a very good team there in the Baltimore Ravens, where if they're 100% healthy this season, they improve during the offseason as well. You got that. Like, I just think, I think that it's going to be harder. I mean, unless you can face the Tennessee Titans in all three rounds this year, which you can't. It's going to be difficult for the Bengals.
All right, it's pretty cut and dry, I guess. Let's go a little more controversial. Who do you think is going to play in more games this year? Christian McCaffrey or Nick Chubb?
Ooh.
And who do you think will have more rushing yards?
So I'll tackle this one first. I think Chubb is going to get more yards because I think they usually just use him more as the power back. Like, he can catch a little bit, but that's what Kareem Hunt is there for. Unless Kareem Hunt gets hurt, then maybe. But I think Nick Chubb is going to be like the rusher of that team, especially with no Jacoby. Well, if no Deshaun Watson for however long, then Nick Chubb is going to get a bulk of the carries. And we've seen him make electric plays. I think he's going to be able to. I think he's going to be the leader in rushing games. I mean, it's hard because I want to see Christian McCaffrey healthy again, man. Because I hate the stigma around running backs that you can't pay them, and then because if you do, they just suddenly start playing terribly. Because that's not fair to Christian McCaffrey. Like, this dude has pure athleticism in his genetics. Like, wasn't one of his parents or like someone in his family like an Olympic athlete? Like, this dude was born literally to be a professional athlete in some sport, and he just so happened to pick football. I think it's been unlucky and unfair, especially that like he had to carry that offense the first 3 years, especially that one season where he had 1,000 rushing and 1,000 receiving yards. So I think it's I feel bad for him, but I think he'll play more than he has the last couple of years. But I do still think Nick Chubb at the end of the day is going to play more games. So I'll give both more games and more rushing yards to Nick Chubb.
Don't forget that Christian McCaffrey is dating Miss Universe 2012.
Ah, yes.
So
wasn't she? Who was she dating before?
Olivia
Amendola?
Yeah. Maybe. Was it Amendola?
She was dating some Patriots wide receiver before.
Yes. Well, this is her run. I know this is off topic. This is her run. It started with Nick Jonas. So Nick Jonas was number one. Went to Tebow after that. Then to Amendola. And now to Christian McCaffrey. So,
wow.
Interesting. Look, Christian McCaffrey is an all-world athlete, an all-world talent. The guy just can't stay healthy. I mean, and it's a shame because it's his grandfather on his mom's side that was the track athlete in the Olympics. But the whole family's got lineage in sports too. But something to me tells me that after 2 seasons of him not playing a full year, that I think he's going to get everything righted this time around. I feel like he's going to be able to make it through a full 17-game season. I think they both will. Honestly, I'm not going to pick one or the other. I think they both will make it through the full 17-game season just because I feel like the way that Carolina's offense now is with Baker Mayfield there, I think that he'll be more of a considerable option and he'll be protected a little bit better. Whereas Chubb's going to have to carry much of the load for most of the beginning of the season, I feel like, because you don't know who the quarterback's going to be really. Yard-wise, My thing is that I feel like if we're talking about straight rushing, I feel like Nick Chubb is going to have more rushing yards because McCaffrey's more of a dual threat back where he'll run and catch. He's a prolific pass catcher out of the backfield. So I feel like if we're talking about solely rushing yards, I feel like Nick Chubb is going to have more because he's going to need to be the driving force in that offense for the first 4, 5, 6 games, etc. from there. Whereas if we're talking about total all-purpose yards, I'd probably give it to McCaffrey because I feel like I know he's done it before where he's had 1,000 rushing and 1,000 receiving in the same year. I can honestly see him getting close to that again, doing that. Not doing that again this year, but maybe next year doing it again. But he'll get close to it. I don't know if he's going to get over 1,000 rushing, but he could probably get over 1,000 receiving because Baker's going to do a lot of the running too. So I can, like I said, I think if I had to pick one or the other, I think McCaffrey plays more games. I feel like Chubb's going to miss one game just for medical or whatever, just for personal reasons.
Takes a lot of shots.
Yeah, there's a lot. He does take a lot of shots. McCaffrey will probably play more games, but I feel like Chubb will get more rushing yards this year.
Fair. I will say this: if he can do 1,000 again, they better give him Offensive Player of the Year this time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Especially looking back, like they gave it to Michael Thomas, who he's also missed a bunch of games ever since that season. Like that was, that's actually kind of crazy to think about.
It is weird. Yeah,
that they've both missed so much time, and Thomas he didn't play all of last season.
No, he didn't.
So it's just, and wow, that 20 going back 2 years. So that was 2019 was their big seasons. So things really went down for both of them ever since.
It did.
Wow. Well,
yeah.
That's how the NFL goes sometimes, and that is the nature of the beast, as they like to say. Is that it? Are we doing one more, or is that it for this week?
Up to you guys. I got more if you want.
We can throw one more in there. Sure, why not? Yeah. We haven't really disagreed yet, so get one.
Yeah, there's been too much agreement. We got to try to disagree here.
Sandoval's getting a headache from all this, buddy.
Let's be a little more we'll get a little tougher question here. Who would you rather have on your team? DK or Debo?
Okay.
For a second, I thought you were gonna. For a second, I really thought you were just gonna troll us and go with the ultimate. Who would you rather have, Ryan Tannehill or Kirk Cousins? And I'm like, can I have neither?
No. Bailey Zappi's always the answer, man. Come on.
Okay, well, true, but can I send both of them to the abyss? Can I just?
Why I haven't asked Billy Zappi. Would you rather Bailey Zappi?
I'll just wait for that, Rick.
That's why. Well, no, it isn't happening because the answer is Bailey Zappi.
Mac Jones is going to have a 3-interception game at some point, and the question for the pod will be, who would you ever have next game, Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi?
It's like if they made an NFL Cards Against Humanity and you had the Bailey Zappi card, that just automatically wins. That's the card that automatically wins.
God. All right.
Yeah.
Debo or DK?
Unfortunately, that's not your question this time. So
I know.
Rick, who you choosing?
I know.
You got a team you're setting up tomorrow. Who you picking? DK or Debo?
Okay, so I'll go first. Unless you want to go, Rick.
Yeah, I have a feeling I know who you're going to pick, and I think I know why I kind of want to go the opposite way.
Rick just disagrees with me all on principle in this one.
Yeah, on principle. Well, no. You know what? I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear your logic. So tell me who you're thinking.
Fair. No, I'm just going to go with Deebo Samuel. I love the versatility that Deebo can bring to the offense. I think, first off, if you just keep him as a receiver, I think he could be a great number one receiver. I think he really showed out last season of what he did for that San Francisco 49ers offense and how he helped make Jimmy G look really good, by the way. So that's worth noting. I think just the ability to use him as kind of a Swiss Army knife, if need be, I think is very tantalizing to me. I think if you give him a full season, which I know they still want to use him as that Swiss Army knife, but if you could give him a full season as just being the number one guy, I think there's a really good shot that you could get like a 1,300-yard season out of Deebo. And I'm going to base it off that. He's got he has the physical tools. Like the guy, he's not, his physicality may not jump off the screen to you like a lot of these other guys. Like Julio Jones is an extraterrestrial when he was at his peak. DK Metcalf is just another type of human being where you just look at him and you question if you're at the actual same species. But I think Debo, much less so compared to those two physically, but I think like he is also can be in that mold where he's just different for a reason. And so I would slightly lean towards Debo. They're both just so extremely talented that again you could go either way with them, but I would give a slight edge to Debo for myself personally.
Well, I was thinking you were going to go DK Metcalf for a minute there. However, I'll go DK Metcalf. The combination of his speed and his height and his ball catching ability are just generational. Like there's not many wide receivers that I can say that I've seen that are 6'4", 235 who can run the 100-yard in like 10.5 seconds and run 23 miles an hour down the field with a 4-yard, head start for the other guy. When Budda Baker made that interception, he was 4 yards ahead of DK Metcalf, and Metcalf sprinted 22 miles an hour down the field to stop him at the 8-yard line. The combination of speed and skill is just insane. I mean, you know me, I prefer taller receivers because I want bigger options down the field. Like I can get the gadget guys all I want, but if I have somebody who's 6'4" or 6'5" who's able to go down the field and who's able to reach up, like when I played touch football in third or fourth grade, I was maybe 5'10", 5'11". I would always tell the quarterback there, "Hey, go up top. I'll catch it. I'll just push the little 5'2" kid down and I'll just catch it." That's what I did. Hey, no pass interference in touch football in fourth grade, so I was all good.
You were 5'10" in fourth grade.
I was a big kid. Yeah, leave me alone.
Oh no, I'm not making fun of you. I was tall too, but like 5'10" in fourth grade, holy like.
Yeah, I mean
that's wild.
Well, it was okay. It was 5'8" with 2 inches of throw, so it was 5'10". But okay. The full package was 5'10".
What do we have to do? What bet do we have to make with you to show us a picture of when you were younger and you had the fro?
None. Well, what I have to do is I have to go home to my parents' house and grab a photo and you guys can see it. Yeah, for sure. It's if I could describe it now, it'd be like a young male Lucille Ball. That's the hairstyle that I had back then. Yeah, it's bad. It's pretty bad. So, but to answer the question, DK Metcalf, please, thank you.
Oh man, that was good. And we sufficiently answered that question as well as giving Justin a future would you rather question as well to have for the season.
Exactly.
Because Mac Jones is probably going to have a bad game or two.
We're just setting up the show for later weeks. Obviously, that's what we do.
Yeah, we think far ahead, including who is going to end up getting a Cole Strange jersey, which kind of actually that bet's value kind of went a little bit down within the last week or so due to recent news.
So, it did. The number changed.
Yeah, we'll update that when the time comes. But
what I will say, I did find this actually recently. We may want to think about going into MLFB, which is the Major League of Football, because they're a brand new league that's starting up relatively soon. They've got some pretty cool names, and I looked at the logos and looked at the color schemes. It's pretty awesome. It's the Alabama Airborne, the Arkansas Attack, the Ohio Force, and the Virginia Armada. The Airborne logo and color scheme is pretty sick. It's like the old Vancouver Grizzlies teal with like black.
Nice.
So that's pretty sick. I might just get the bomber jacket just for the heck of it. Why not? So.
Oh, there's that, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was another resounding round of NFL Would You Rather, and those are our games for this week. Per usual, our gracious host killed it once again, and now he is making it his goal to stump us all in trivia. The question, because you've stumped me and Rick like once or twice, Justin. Let's be real here. Your rival is Sandoval.
Well, so I feel like I also wasted like a lot of questions when we were just like hanging out, and I used to just like bring up random trivia that I'm like, I already asked that question. I know they know the answer.
Yeah, well, but do we? I mean, how long ago was it when we actually hung out and like had a day where we didn't do anything? And then
that's the thing. Like Justin, you got to remember that was 2019, 2020 when we did a lot of those. Like, if you ask me and Rick to remember the punters of the 2019 season and who led it, I'll do respect. I don't know if we'll get it first try.
Justin, a lot of things happened from 2019 on to now. I got married twice. A lot of things have happened since then.
One of those marriages worked to this podcast, by the way.
Okay, fine. 3 times. The podcast and 2 to my actual wife. Yes, that's fair. Yes.
The best. The best. So don't be afraid to reuse it, because Justin, I'm going to be real with you. Like I at least for me, as we hear a dog bark in the background, it was extremely funny. Well, with my friend, within the last 24 hours, he had to text me our dinner order because I was not going to remember it if he just told me. But but we were just talking today about stuff that happened like a decade ago between us, and I was remembering details. So the memory is very much touch and go in certain
And Justin,
instances.
you got to think, if Jurgen's having problems remembering a 5-piece McNugget meal with fries and a Coke, how hard is it to remember a 2019 punters?
All right, that's fair.
How dare you? I would have remembered that. Anyways, moving on to the main course of the show. We just keep on with the food themes, not even intentionally. But the Sports Agents of Chaos NFL weekly divisional breakdowns, ladies and gentlemen. We're here. Like I said, it's the last week. It's the NFC West. And this division, the AFC and the NFC West, really going back to last season, have produced really good teams. I think 5 combined playoff teams between these two divisions last year. In the AFC, you had the Chiefs and the Raiders. In the NFC, you had the Rams, the 49ers, and the Cardinals. So that's pretty good. Now this year, it can actually be more, all things considered, with what the AFC West has become. So we talked about it last week. Someone here gave a little bit of a spoiler on what their thoughts on the playoff picture will be. I'm not going to point out who that was. But in this division, we will try to stay away from that because we are going to be going through over our playoffs in the next episode. But for now, we just look at this division. And there are a lot of different ways that you could take this. I say we start off with a bang because we mentioned them in the Would You Rather, and I don't think we should waste any time talking about this team. The NFC West is home to the defending Super Bowl champions, les champions, you could call them. The Los Angeles Rams beat the Cincinnati Bengals in the Super Bowl off of a quite epic final drive that saw Cooper Kupp catching the biggest catch of the season, biggest catch of his career, biggest pass of Matt Stafford's career, et cetera, et cetera. But the Rams were able to overcome the Bengals, and they beat them. And they went through this offseason, and they lost a little bit, as all champions do in sports. It's very, in hockey, you get there's the Stanley Cup tax for guys leaving. So in the NFL, it's very much a similar thing. It's the Super Bowl charge up now that guys can get with their next contracts. And a couple guys did leave the Rams. One of their corners went to the Jacksonville Jaguars to join up with a team that also got Christian Kirk. Von Miller left to the Buffalo Bills, as we have spoken about earlier on in our weekly divisional breakdowns. So they lost a couple pieces. But at the same time, I mean, this team stood packed. They inked Matthew Stafford to a big contract. They kept Aaron Donald. They reworked his deal. They reworked Cooper Kupp's deal recently as well. So both those guys are getting paid very handsomely, mind you. And they also still have a couple guys, and they brought in a couple pieces, including, I think this is the big one that we'll talk about in greater detail, Allen Robinson going to that team, finally answering the prayers that I have said on so many podcasts. I have hoped for so many years that Allen Robinson would go to a team with a real quarterback. And finally, after the constant gulag of Blake Bortles and Andy Dalton and Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles, he has Matthew Stafford. So good for him. I'm happy for Allen Robinson. I've been begging for a quarterback for him for so many years, and he finally has one. So the Rams are still a very strong team on both ends. And of course, they were also able to keep Sean McVay because there was the whole rumor that he could leave and such. So Rick, I'll throw it to you since we were actually just talking about this team and what their odds are. What do you think of the Rams, like what their offseason was and the odds that it gives them to let's set the baseline of making it back to the NFC Championship game at least?
I feel like in a lot of different ways, the Rams kind of held serve because they did have some of the best players in the league. I mean, but all they did was restructure, and all they did was they reworked deals to kind of keep those guys there and keep them happy. You talk about it a bunch in prior podcasts where you like seeing teams that have dynastic builds where they're, building for the future and they want to keep their core together. Well, the core of Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp and Matt Stafford are a solid core for the Rams to have. I think what the Rams also did, which I think was really important, was that they didn't put any pressure on Cam Akers. They didn't bring in another running back that, could challenge him for the spot. I mean, they have Darrell Henderson, but they got rid of Sony Michel. So they don't, it's really Cam Akers' time. And that's going to help him kind of work his way back from the injury that he had. Cam Akers, I think, was an ACL or something of that nature where it was rough for him to kind of, get back into the fold. One thing that I wasn't really crazy about what they haven't really done to my liking, I would say, is I don't really know if they've replaced Andrew Whitworth on the offensive line. I don't really know for sure if I see a guy there who's going to be an automatic replacement for what Whitworth was on that O-line. I mean, you have tackles there like Chandler Brewer and Bob Evans and, Joseph Notaboom, but at the same time, like none of those names are really. Maybe they're going to get better with time. Maybe they're going to improve with time and with play and with decency. But I think I'm looking at this Rams team and I'm saying like while they didn't go out and set the world on fire in the offseason, they didn't really need to because they didn't lose a ton. They gained a couple here and there. I mean, I'll take a swap if you have Akeem to leave and then you send him away and then Bobby Wagner comes to your team. I'll take that in a heartbeat. I mean, Bobby Wagner is going to make the linebacker core so much better, I think. And also, Wagner and Leonard there. So I like what the Rams did. I think I like that they kind of stayed the course in some ways. And I think that what it makes it done is it says, listen, we know that we're the number one team. We know the objectives we had to do. It wasn't to get better pieces. It was to lock up our top guys for the rest of their careers, if not for, the future. So I think in that respect, the Rams kind of had a quieter offseason than I think you would anticipate or expect. And also, listen, Sean McVay got married, so he was kind of busy doing other things, this offseason too. So got to give him a little bit of a pause for that. But I like this Rams team. I like who they are. I think it's going to be an interesting aspect to see how Raheem Morris does again as their D coordinator, how their new O coordinator does, because Kevin O'Connell's now the head coach of the Vikings. But I don't really see any flaws in this team. I mean, I don't really see anything significantly. The one thing that maybe could be a problem is that Stafford's 34 now. Age for a quarterback does kind of run you the risk, because I look at their quarterback depth and neither John Wolford nor Bryce Perkins nor Luis Perez inspire a lot of confidence in me. Luis Perez was a great Division II athlete, but that's great, but doesn't really, do much, I guess, in that regard. So, I like where the Rams are, and I think that's kind of it. They see where they are. They know that they weren't going to do anything that big, but what they did was right for them and for their team at the time.
Right. They locked up their core, and they also they bought a couple pieces here to also surround their core, which is kind of what you expect from a champion. That's what championship teams do. They also, you mentioned the tackle situation. Joseph Noteboom is the one that got an extension actually after the Super Bowl. He got a 3-year, $40 million contract for this team, and he's started at left guard for them before. So I believe the idea is that he is actually going to be the successor for Whitworth at left tackle, all things considered. And also bring up Bobby Wagner. It's been so long I forgot that Bobby Wagner was also signed with them as well. So you got Robinson on offense, you had Wagner on defense. That team, as well as what they already have, the pieces they have, the team is looking good. So I mean, Justin, I could throw it to you in a similar thing. The Rams, they were a team that kind of excited. I think they just did their job in the offseason, and sometimes that's all the team has to do. We know how difficult it is to make it back to the Super Bowl. Rams, you could tackle what this season will be, but are they probably of the most recent Super Bowl champions? Are they maybe the best on paper we've seen a Super Bowl champion look right after in quite some time? Because their roster's still good.
Yeah, I mean, their roster, it looks good. They're a little bit older than I feel like most Super Bowl winning teams usually are the next season. They did lose a little bit of youth, but they replaced it with veterans that in theory could, step right in and fill a role immediately. I do like the addition of Allen Robinson. Hopefully, even though he's, been in the league for what seems like forever, he's still not a very old player. I think he's 29 now. So, yeah, I mean, in theory, they should be right up there with the cream of the crop in the NFC. I think the NFC got a little weaker, so I think that their path might be a little easier to get back to. But Rick is right. The name of the game in that one is staying healthy. If the team can stay healthy, they should have as good a chance to repeat as any other team would have to make that Super Bowl.
And you think of the path that they could go through, there's a very good chance that path will run through LA. And we always talk about it in seasons past, how willing are teams to get that number one seed. What do you think, Justin? Do you think the Rams have the confidence now that they've done it? Do you think they're going to focus in on the number one seed this year, or do you think they could be a team where it's final week of the season, it could be between them and someone else, and they're nah, you could have it?
It depends. It depends on the situation. I mean, if they're maybe going against a top team, that they're like, all right, maybe we don't want to necessarily succeed, give that position up, they might say, "Hey, let's go at it and let's see what we can do." Or they might say, "Listen, it's not worth hurting our guys. We have some older guys. They're banged up. They have some little nagging injuries that we'd rather give them a week's rest now, as opposed to one that we might not get the next week, even if we go at it our all." So it's going to be interesting. Um, I could see them resting their starters. I think later in the year, again, just due to age, and they really don't. I don't necessarily know if they can survive another injury like they did with Robert Woods, and just hope that they get lucky with an Odell Beckham just out of the woodwork signing with that team. So it's not really a situation that happens all that often. So yeah, I would say probably rest.
You know that the Rams, Jurg and Justin, haven't been the number one seed in the NFL playoffs since the Greatest Show on Turf? Because 2018 they were the number 2 seed because they lost the tiebreaker to New Orleans. They were both 13-3. They were the two.
And that championship game was in New Orleans.
Exactly. So it's a team. The Rams are a team that I don't think really cares about being the number 1 seed, because I think the way that they're built is that they only care about winning their division and winning the games they need to win, because the rest of everything, come what may, having that number 1 seed can come with a bit of a stigma. I mean, we've seen it. How, number 1 seeds that have made it to the Super Bowl up until recently have been kind of few and far between, if you think about it, because the NFL playoffs are just so unpredictable in a way. And the thing with the Rams too is that, and this is another thing that I didn't really talk about them that much, and why it's kind of ho-hum. Their first pick in this year's draft was 104. Like, we didn't see them at all until the end of day 2, pretty much. Like, they didn't trade up. They didn't want any bigger pieces. They didn't have the capital, sure, but they didn't want to trade up for trying to get either. We know they would have picked Chris Olave instead of the Saints. We know that would have happened, but regardless, it would have been a case where they trade up and they give up the farm, and they just didn't want to do that because they didn't need to. So I don't think Sean McVay really cares about the number 1 seed at all. I think he just cares about getting through the season, getting his guys as healthy as possible. If they can host the NFC title game as the 2 or as the 3, I think they'll take that. But I don't think this is a team that really, when push comes to shove, if it's between them and like a Tampa, or in Justin's case of Green Bay, or in my case of Detroit, I don't think it's really going to matter to them that much if they have the number 1 seed. I think they're fine with playing 1 home playoff game or 2, depending on how things shake out.
Rick, if the Lions make it to the NFC Championship game at 15-2, and the Rams come in, I'm sorry, they're getting smoked.
Hey, listen. I had the Lions at 12-5, on 15-2.
Oh, can we go back and just listen to that statement again, Jurg?
I confused his takes. I thought the Lions were his undefeated team, or close to.
No.
Even at 12-5 and winning and going to the NFC Championship game, can we get back to reality here, guys? Jesus Christ! Come on.
We've got a deer wearing sunglasses on our podcast, Justin. What reality do you want to get back to?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Justin wishes he could just have the reality stone and just
go watch Moon Age Daydream. That's reality for you.
Or just rewatch the scene where Thanos gets the stone. It's like, now reality can be whatever I want.
Oh, that. I mean, I was going more for like the posters in the background for like that kind of like psychedelic.
I got a Bowie one over there.
Drama. Yeah, I believe you. I believe you.
So moving on from the Rams, that somehow that discussion ended up with mentioning the Detroit Lions. Well, we start with the top of the division. Before we get to the other 2 teams that are more likely to challenge, let's just go through the 4th team here really quick. The perennial. Oh, is that a preview? The Seattle Seahawks, ladies and gentlemen, are a team that not a lot of people have faith in for this upcoming season. And when your quarterback room is as follows of Jacob Eason, Geno Smith, and Drew Lock, how they don't go 17-0, I don't see it. I don't see them going that good. Let's just be real here. This was a complete teardown. This was the official end of an era, essentially, for Seattle. Why Pete Carroll stayed for 1 more season, at least, I don't know. I feel for the guy. I would love to. I was talking about this with a coworker, and I think Justin would probably be the one to find it. I need to see the list of coaches who win a Super Bowl and the last season that they coached with that team they won the Super Bowl with is only like 3 wins or less, because like this Seahawks team might be pretty bad this year. But Seattle Seahawks, obviously, the quarterback situation is not ideal. They traded Russell Wilson after, for a couple of years now, things were looking to be brewing between Russ and that front office. They lost him. They ended up cutting Bobby Wagner. They lost Chris Carson recently, actually, to early retirement. They did do right by him in cutting him and making sure he could get like even more money because of his purposes for retiring. So good on you, Seattle. You did right by your guy there. But it is just it's kind of tough in Seattle, really, aside from the wide receiving core of this team, which, I mean, you look at the wide receiving core here, you got a Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf being the 1 and 2. And you also have, from the trade with the Broncos, you have a Noah Fant there as your tight end. Like, there's actually good receiving weapons for the Seahawks team. The problem is, it doesn't look like there's a good quarterback there in the background to throw to them. Essentially, the 4 of us, and I'm including Sandoval, the 4 of us could go there. We could make it a 7 quarterback room. And honestly, I would give one of us a fair shot at being the 3rd string quarterback, truth be told. But it's just not looking good for Seattle. Of course, like I said, they also cut Bobby Wagner. And that was essentially the final nail in the coffin in terms of guys just being gone that were there during that Super Bowl championship defense. And they just have a myriad of a couple decent players, a couple guys that they're hoping can take the next step, because for a while now, Seattle's been a interesting team in terms of drafts recently. With some of the drafts that they had, that like they tend to reach for a guy whenever they had later first round picks. They would reach for a guy with that first round pick that they wanted, that they probably weren't going to get in the second round. So it's been interesting roster construction for Seattle for a while now, and now they have to go through a season with no Russell Wilson to help them like fully. He's not even on the roster, and so it's going to be a tough one. Justin, it's sometimes tough to talk about these teams because like we've done it with the Texans, we did a little bit of it with the Jaguars, although we had a little bit more faith for them. We did it with the Falcons. There's one more team that I'm just forgetting off the top of my head who we did it with. There have been some tough teams that we have to go through. What does the 12th man in Seattle have to look forward to this season, my guy?
Next season.
2023.
Look, it's a full teardown, which some of it makes sense to me and some of it doesn't. I really like their draft pick this year. I think he's going to be a great left tackle. They have some good young receivers. I mean, even Tyler Lockett's only 29 at this point. So, I think he'll be 30 some point during the season. He does have some injury concerns, but the issue is they're not going to have a run game. As much as I like some of their younger running backs there's no offensive line. So they're going to get hit a lot before their line of scrimmage. I think teams are going to stack the box against them, and they're going to try and expose their quarterbacks and expose that offensive line. And it's going to be a long year in Seattle. That being said, you got to have some faith in what the GM does there, John Snyder, I believe. He's built championship teams before, and if they're going to have some high draft picks and some cap space and clear some stuff out, they're going to probably be good again. But I don't see it this year. I don't think there's anything really inspiring on defense, especially now that they say Jamal Adams has been out indefinitely because he's getting checked on with his hand. They're paying $178 million to 3 players. 2 of them are safeties. So, yeah, they have $100 million tied up in safeties, and they just signed DK, which, again, DK deserves every penny of that contract for sure. He's one of the bright young players in this league, and he, even without a quarterback, I can expect good numbers from him. He should still have 6, 7, maybe even 8 touchdowns, and probably at least close to 1,000 yards. But that's the only really bright spot I see. I think Kenneth Walker's going to take a lot of hits this year. I think whoever the quarterback is, whether it's Geno Smith or your boy shooter sleeve Drew Lock, Jerg, I don't expect a ton of offense there, and I don't really expect a ton of defense. So, especially in a tough division, they play the AFC West. They have to play their own NFC West. It's gonna be a long year. It's just not in the cards for them this year.
Yeah, and it's you mentioned it, like even with some of the top names that they do have, that mainly Jamal Adams being out, it's certainly not a good thing with what little talent you have isn't even going to be able to play the whole season. That makes it worse. So you mentioned some of the names there, and this is kind of how I'm going to throw it to Rick before he also goes into his analysis for them. Rick, there are a couple notable names on this team, and we've actually mentioned in passing in previous weeks of could some of these guys potentially be available by the trade deadline? And it's always one of those interesting things for a team like Seattle because they want to have the faith that they could make this a quick turnaround. And so you maybe want to keep some of those guys there. But you also look at the situation where it's a Quandre Diggs who's 29 going on 30, where it's a Tyler Lockett who's 29 going on 30. And maybe if Jamal Adams can get healthy, if you could maybe trade him, that could be an option. Do you see the Seahawks really we know their roster's torn down, but do you see them just completing that? Like, do you see them trading Diggs and trading Lockett this year, or do they maybe hold out on that? And then just after that, your overall thoughts for them this season?
I think that it's definitely a teardown year for them. I think that they've got pieces there that are kind of albatrosses that will cause them more headache by staying. I thought for sure DK Metcalf was gone, and he might still be gone. Like, the fact that he signed an extension to me is just mirror fodder. Like, I don't really see it as anything more than just like smoke. Like, he might be gone as well by the deadline as well. There is one scenario that is kind of playing in my head that says that Seattle might be a buyer at the deadline. But that is only if something happens with Jimmy Garoppolo, because there's been a lot of discussion regarding the Niners might want to cut him rather than trade him. So if they cut him, Seattle's not going to have to make a trade with San Francisco to get him. That could put a quarterback into that room. And if that's the case, then you've got a Garoppolo there. Again, it doesn't solve all your problems, but at the same time, it solves the quarterback room. It gives you a legitimate starting quarterback. So that could be a realm of possibility. I don't know if I see it happening like that, but it could be a realm of thought. But the Seahawks, as they are currently constructed, are not a good team. There's just no messing around about it. Like, you're talking about Drew Lock or Jacob Eason or Iken Ampali's favorite brother, Geno Smith, possibly starting off this year as quarterback. We talked about Chris Carson, I think last week, a couple weeks ago. Rashad Penny's their number one, but Kenneth Walker will become their number one. And honestly, it's not a bad play for Kenneth Walker to be in Seattle because I can see him in the mold of a Sean Alexander or a Ricky Waters as like the next best Seattle running back, but it's going to take some time. It is going to take some time for him to get there. They need more offensive line help. And Charles Cross, who they drafted, is an excellent tackle, but they need more than that. Their secondary, they've got some good young pieces. If they do want to get rid of Quandre Diggs, and Jamal Adams, they've got Kobe Bryant, who they drafted from Cincinnati. They've got Tariq Woolen, who I was high on out of UTSA. They've got some younger pieces that are there, but this is a team maybe worse than Chicago, maybe worse than Atlanta. Like, this is a team that just doesn't have anybody that I would say on their roster. I think this is a team that is going to be in the hunt with Houston for the number one overall pick in the 23 draft. Because like I said, the one scenario, if they get Garoppolo, maybe their stock improves, but only marginally because Garoppolo can't block for himself. So therefore, it's not a case where I would really have any faith in that.
That's also a guy who has suffered some injuries as well, like with being attacked by pass rush. And I saw that you wanted to talk about the Garoppolo.
I don't even know why they would bring in Garoppolo. I mean, what worst comes to worst, he wins some games with them and then ruins their draft stock next year. I mean, there got to be a team that's in the running for one of these young quarterbacks and a supposedly stacked draft class. Makes no sense to muddy up that water and bring him in.
Well, again, I mean, I agree with you there, but I think the case being what it is, I have an issue with seeing any of these three guys finishing out the season as a starting quarterback for Seattle based upon if their offensive line is going to be absolutely trucked, which it's going to be. They might have to bring in a fourth quarterback to finish out the year or have Michael Dixon or Jason Myers just be punter, kicker / quarterback and close out the year that way. I mean, yeah, would it hurt? Sure. But the thing is that if you have Garoppolo in, then you can instead take an offensive lineman, or if you have a higher pick and you have Garoppolo said, you can trade with a team that really wants one of those quarterbacks, get a king's ransom of picks. That way you can pick up another wide receiver and an offensive tackle or a guard in this draft and start building up from there. And maybe Garoppolo's not the answer long term, but at least he can guide the ship until a couple of years down the line where you have a better offensive line and a better weapon set to bring in the quarterback of the future for him. I mean, it's, like I said, I'm playing GM, John Schneider, do whatever the heck you're going to do. You know, you apparently like Geno Smith, which is a red flag in my book. So, you know, but I'm just saying like that's the scenario where I could see them possibly doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you never know, especially with like it may. I definitely see Justin's point, but it also could just end up being a case like Rick says, where it's like they may just have to do that, like just so someone finishes the year.
The only reason that that they would do that is if they didn't think they have any job security, because no team is willing to tank so that a team can get their replacements. It's just not. It makes no sense. You're paying me, and I want to keep my job. I'm not going to tank the season so that you can fire me and somebody else can have that draft pick. So
Right.
It's not completely unheard of. But if John Schneider has any job security there, he's tanking this year.
Right.
Yeah.
And it'll certainly be interesting to see what the future does hold for Seattle with the schedule that they have. Like you said, Justin, they're taking on their own division twice a year, and then there is the AFC West. That is 10 games. If they're any better than 2-8 in those 10 games, I'll be thoroughly impressed because it is looking rough. It is looking rough for the Seattle Seahawks this season, to say the very least. So, I mean, guys, you mentioned Jimmy G. We talked a little bit about him. Let's just go with the team that he's currently on. You know, natural transitions, ladies and gentlemen. It's the beauty of podcasting sometimes. Next team we'll talk about here in the NFC West is the San Francisco 49ers, who, I mean, we just talked about what the future could be for Jimmy G. They could cut him instead of trading him. That means just one thing, that Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, has a chance of being the backup quarterback because it is finally time for Trey Lance to be starting quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, their former third overall pick, who they made 2 trades going up into the draft to be able to pick him at number 3. It was a very intriguing thing. I believe they traded back and then they traded forward. It's a whole ordeal. But the San Francisco 49ers will have a new quarterback under center this year. Kyle Shanahan will get a quarterback that he thoroughly believes in, obviously because they drafted him as high as they could, with Trey Lance there for them. So what that could mean, who knows? So we'll look at the San Francisco 49ers team, made it to the NFC Championship game, beat the Dallas Cowboys in a wild card game last season that went down to the final play, really. And they beat the Green Bay Packers in Lambeau Field, a game that was kind of designed for that 49ers team. People, I spoke about this going into that game, but I don't understand the whole warm weather team going into cold weather area, because if you look at a Kyle Shanahan team, especially last season, he loves running the ball. Like, that kind of looks like it's more built for Kyle Shanahan than anything. So in San Francisco, in an environment that I'm sure they didn't have any issues with at all, they go there and they beat the Green Bay Packers. And they have the lead at one point against the LA Rams in the NFC Championship games. But a couple of plays here and there, including an interception that was for naught, or an interception that almost happened but didn't, ends up going for the Rams. The Rams win it. They go on to the Super Bowl, and the 49ers NFC Championship game runner-up. And this season we saw, for the most part, like a lot of this roster stayed the same. There was a little bit of issues with Deebo Samuel, but you got to believe he's going to be coming back to a wide receiving core that has a Brandon Ayuk on the team that, you know, the belief there is that he's going to take that next step for them this season. Personally, we actually spoke about Brandon Ayuk weeks back on this podcast when we talked about, you know, guys who could break out. Big Brandon Ayuk fans on this podcast. There's a lot of belief that if he gets the opportunity, he's going to be big for them. Of course, you have George Kittle on that team. The running game, once again, I've said it once, I'll say it again. Kyle Shanahan, starts with his father, Mike Shanahan, but the Shanahan coaching tree just in general, running backs thrive. They just know how to get running backs the ball and just make them absolutely be able to tear it up. You put anybody in that backfield, and the Niners running game will be just fine. So you have that. You have an offensive line that's still put together. You have a defense that lost a couple pieces. There are some holes in this defense I think teams will be able to, you know, attack, but there's still the known names on this team. You still have what they hope can be a good year out of Eric Armstead. You have Nick Bosa, who is going to be a key part of this defensive line for them. You have one of the best linebackers in the game in a Fred Warner, who is just, that kid is supremely talented. And then you have and also Dre Greenlaw, by the way, in that linebacking core, worth noting. He is also pretty talented. And you have a decent defensive back crew. Nothing special. No number one corner on this team, like definitively, no like top 5 safety in the game, but a defensive back crew that has just done the job the best they can over the last couple of years, and it's worked for them so far. Will that continue to work? We'll see. I'm going to throw it to Rick first. San Francisco 49ers, Rick, a lot of belief in them. They also beat the Rams twice in the regular season last year. So they clearly had the Rams number going into the playoffs before they lost in the NFC Championship game. They look to be the definitive second best team for a while in this division, but now it's Trey Lance. And this is Trey Lance's, like, he played a game and a half or 2 games last year, but this is his audition. It's a full season for him. Will the 49ers, simply put, and then you can also go into your analysis, will the 49ers be a playoff team this season with Trey Lance as the full-time starting quarterback?
No. Oh, I go on from there. Oh, okay.
Yeah, some analysis.
Okay, yes. Look, do they have enough pieces that are around him? Absolutely. I think Elijah Mitchell was a surprise, near 1,000-yard running back last year for them. Obviously, Raheem Mostert is no longer on this team. But I think that there's just not enough in Trey Lance that will convince me that he's worthy. I get it. The Kyle Shanahan, Mike Shanahan tree, I get it, is solid enough, but I have a lot of problems with Trey Lance being in this mold, being thrown right away, right here. It's funny that he's going to have 2 easy games to start off with because, you play Chicago, then you host Seattle, but then you look at that next swath, you've got Denver at Denver, then the Rams, and then Carolina. You've got teams that are probably just going to swallow him alive. He's got good receivers. He's got a very good, running game. Obviously, George Kittle, you got to account for him. So the pieces are there, but I just think that he's still too green. I think he's still too raw of a player to saddle with this kind of mindset. And that the problem is San Francisco really didn't settle this until this week, basically, when they said, we're moving on to Trey Lance. Like, you had all this time where you didn't know who your starting quarterback was going to be, whether it was Garoppolo with how much money he was making, or a kid in Trey Lance who played, 1 game in his final year in college and played 6 possibly, I think, last year. The tape isn't enough for me to really be convincing that I would say he's going to be that big guy. And the fact of the matter is that this is the team that I think will take some steps back. I think this is the team that's going to take steps backward. I don't see them as the number 2 seed in the NFC West. I don't think this is a team that is as high, it should be as high as everyone thinks they are, because I just think when it comes to Trey Lance getting the ball out of his hand and out of the pocket quickly to guys like Ayuk and Samuel and Ray McLeod, I just don't see it happening that way. I think there's enough problems. Like, yes, they've had their number, but you got to remember also that, again, the Rams don't really care about being the number 1 seed. But I think because of the fact that they had the Rams number last year, the Rams are now going to look at those games, circle those games, and make sure that they win those games against San Francisco and punish the 49ers on both sides of the ball, or 3 sides if you want to count special teams as well. So I think in that regard, I think this is going to be a rough year for San Francisco. I really don't see them competing that as much as everyone says they are. And again, I don't see them as my number 2 team in the NFC West at all.
So Justin, you had an immediate reaction, so I will go to you. Trust me. That is very interesting. So, okay, I don't even know where to begin with that, because we know you and Cedric, like there are the pieces there. I know your main reason that you don't know if Trey, like, is it just you think Trey Lance's mistakes are going to be too much for them to overcome in certain instances? I think is that the number 1 thing you're going, like, above all, like, is that the key crux of it?
So I think Trey Lance, I think he can be a good quarterback, but I feel like a lot of the hype on Trey Lance was coming out of the fact that he was the next Carson Wentz out of North Dakota State. And he was the next big Division I AA guy or FCS guy that was going to take the world by storm, basically. And I don't know how much of that was hype and how much of that was true facts and true testament. My thing is that I think that he's still got a lot to learn. And I think this is not really a division where I can be comfortable saying, let him learn. Because by the time that he gets into like week 7, let's say, you're talking about a 6-game stretch where they're, I go back to the schedule. They're playing Kansas City. They have the Rams in LA, then a bye, then the Chargers, the Cardinals in Mexico City, New Orleans, and Miami. Like it's not a schedule that's worthy of any second or third year quarterback, let alone a guy who has only played 6 games, started 2, and wasn't very good when it came to any of that. So I feel like that's an issue in that regard too for me. So I think it is on Trey Lance. I really do. I think he's not ready for it yet.
Mm-hmm. Fair. Justin, that was a take.
Well, what was your original question, Jared? Because that's what confused me. Do you think he's got? Do you think he'll start?
Are the 49ers still a playoff team with Trey Lance as the full-time starting quarterback now?
Oh, well, it comes down to a lot of different questions, I think, to me, because one of their major issues over the last few years has been injuries. All of their main guys, even with Jimmy G, it's been, can these guys stay healthy? Nick Bosa doesn't always play. Even Elijah Mitchell last year, who bursted onto the scene, he missed 6 games, throughout the season.
George Kittle as well.
So can Debo stay healthy? Can Ayuk stay healthy? Can Trent Williams stay healthy? Can their defensive studs stay healthy? If that's the case, then we'll really see, what we can out of Trey Lance, who, again, also has to stay healthy because he wasn't 100% healthy last year. So if all of these guys can stay healthy, I think that Shanahan has the ability to scheme very well to cover up a quarterback's mistakes. I think Trey Lance is incredibly accurate. He's a great runner. I think that they could be a wild card team, but I don't have them winning a divisional game. I mean, winning a division. We don't want to forget. They were an interception away from being in the Super Bowl last year.
Essentially.
They hit him right in the hands, and one of their young secondary players dropped it, and they would have sealed the game against the Rams, and we would have definitely had a different Super Bowl championship last year. So they are one of these teams that every time you think they're going away, they're still here. Their defense is nasty. They can get after the quarterback. Their secondary doesn't have like all those huge names in it. They're a solid team. They're schemed well, and they can run the ball, whether it's with Debo, whether it's with Elijah Mitchell, whether it's with one of those other revolving doors of running backs that they always seem to have. So we'll see. I mean, I don't dislike the 49ers. I think that they will certainly be competitive. I have them hovering, around that divisional round, maybe a little bit worse. I don't want to give away who I have in that spot, but yeah, I think that the Niners have what it takes, and I think Trey Lance can be that guy. Will he be that guy this year? I think it's going to depend on a lot more than whether or not he can play well. It's going to be a lot about who can stay healthy.
Fair, and I think with a situation like this, and again, it's with Trey Lance, it's one of those things that Rick said it himself, he's the wild card in this team that we don't know the kind of season he's going to have. Now, I will say this, like for myself with the 49ers, on paper to me, this season could go one of two ways. And I think it's what we've been talking about. It's a boom or bust season in what their potential could be, because you have a guy in Trey Lance who it's going to be his first full season starting. He showed a couple of flashes last season of what he could potentially do. And there was some good and there was also some bad. And so, like, if he struggles like most rookie quarterbacks do, I think it will be hard for him to make it back to the playoffs. But if he can have a big leap that I think people are expecting, because, and this is the thing, like, on paper, he's the most talented quarterback. Like, mechanics, arm power plus accuracy, playmaking potential, ability. He is the most talented quarterback on paper that Kyle Shanahan has had. He's more talented than Jimmy G. He's more talented than Matt Ryan. And he's more talented than Kirk Cousins. Like he's the most talented guy on paper.
Matt Ryan is so good, dude.
Come on.
Intangibles. Look,
good in his prime.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a spicier take than my take right there. That's paper, a really
on paper. Trey Lance is
but you don't win football games on paper, Jerg.
You have to start on paper and then see how it goes on the field. So that's all you can work on.
Look, I'm just saying. Listen, the kid hasn't played 10 games in the NFL yet, and you're going to say that he's on paper better, more.
I'm saying
talented.
I'm saying
maybe he's a better runner.
Potential. I'm saying talent potential. That's what the hope is.
Let me also specify as well. San Francisco is starting a brand new left guard because Laken Tomlinson's on the Jets, and Alex Mack, their center, retired. You're starting 2 new centers in the interior for Trey Lance to work with. If you're a rookie quarterback, you want your offensive line to probably stay there for years, work with you, grow with you, become better in that regard. The fact that he lost the center and the left guard, as Sienna will join me right here, on the day before her birthday, by the way. It shows her she's turning 2 tomorrow. The fact of the matter is, though, that it's one of those things where it's just, that's my problem. You talk about the health. Well, how about you want Spencer Burford, who they just drafted to replace Laken Tomlinson? You got Donovan West, who went undrafted to replace Alex Mack. It's not going to be a pretty offensive line for this 49ers team. It just isn't.
And no, that's fair. And like we talked about it, like there's no arguing that there's definitely a lot of, but that's why I said I think like this team being a wild card, it starts with Trey Lance, and the positions around him will be the case. But like Kyle Shanahan got him for a reason. Like they made those trades for a reason. There is a belief for that team, for that organization, that he could be the guy. I'm not saying he's going to do it in year one as motorcycle reps, New York City, ladies and gentlemen. But I'm not saying like definitively things are going to happen. But they brought him in for a reason, because I think Shanahan believes that talent-wise, all the intangibles, I think he believes that he can make Trey Lance even better than what he could be with anyone else. And so like that's what it is with pushing your chips to the table. And like I mean, we're not going to get too much in the conversation now, because I think we actually need to wait to see how the season plays out. But like this, Trey Lance is the draft pick that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have put their jobs on the line for. Like that's undisputable to say the least. So
I mean, we're talking about possibly 2 regimes in the NFC West that are going to be done by the end of this year. Then in that case,
yeah. And speaking of tying yourself to your quarterback, ladies and gentlemen, the final team in this division that we're going to talk about here, who just recently inked their quarterback to a big money contract, the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals, I think, to me, are a very interesting team that we're going to get in depth on here. And don't worry, the boys did enough scouting and film room tape on the Cardinals. I didn't have to set a requirement for them to have to do it on their own time. I don't have to worry about my guys when it comes to that. But the Arizona Cardinals...
Just setting up for my film room joke.
I'm sorry. But the Arizona Cardinals are the final team we're going to talk about before we give our division predictions for this team, or for the NFC West. And it'll be intriguing, to say the least, with the Arizona Cardinals. A team that started out hot last season. The Arizona Cardinals, for the first half of the 2021 NFL season, looked to be one of the top 5 teams in the league. Kyler Murray in that offense was going. DeAndre Hopkins was looking good still. That defense was playing even above expectations, I think. And then things fell apart, as is apropos for Cliff Kingsbury's second half of the season. If you date back to his college years, I'll try to see if I can pull it up here, because I think I have it somewhere on my phone. But his record in second halves of the season is abysmal, to say the very least. But the Arizona Cardinals completely fell flat in the second half of 2021. Ended up being a wild card team after they were in the lead for the division for a while, and they lost in spectacularly terrible fashion to the Los Angeles Rams in a Monday Night Football wild card game that included that just crazy interception that Kyler just shouldn't have thrown, but he did, to say the least. Went through a lot this offseason, including trading their first-round pick for Hollywood Brown from the Baltimore Ravens. They lost Chandler Jones, which was a big detractor for that defense, because he was a massive part for them last season in terms of sack production. I want to say he was the sack leader off memory, but I'm not 100% certain. But he's certainly been a key cog for that defense for a while. And then the Kyler Murray stuff was happening, and then they finally inked him to his big money deal, 5 years, $230 million, I think it was, 160 plus guaranteed, something along those lines. He got paid. And good for Kyler, by the way. Like, we didn't talk about it on the show, but of course we're happy for Kyler. As we say, we always want all these players to get paid. So they inked their quarterback for the future, which is good. Now, will that future end up with more playoff success? That's the question. Justin, I'm going to start off with you. And we could talk about the roster and what they still have and the additions they made, but to me, this is the biggest question with the Cardinals. What do they have to do to overcome this whole second half collapse that they always deal with? Because it wasn't so notable in Kyler's rookie season, because they were just not that great of a team. But his second year, they were actually doing pretty good, but they kind of faltered, and they were a game away from being a wild card team in Kyler's second season, and they fell. They lost to, I think it was the Bears in the season finale. And then year 3, great start to the season, top seed. Kyler was like a lot of people's midseason MVPs. Who had that? And then you had the second half that ends with that loss to the Rams. what do they need to like? What are they not figuring out yet, Justin? That clearly the people on this podcast have the answer to, which is why I'm asking you. What do they need to do in the second half of seasons to just be a better team?
I think it's the same thing as the 49ers. They got to stay on the field. I mean, they had some really key contributors go down midway through last season. Kyler Murray missed a couple games with a nagging injury. J.J. Watt finished the season on the IR. DeAndre was on and off the field. He had, I think, hamstring issues. And their running backs, which they relied on heavily last year in Chase Edmonds and John Connor, were unhealthy. I mean, Chase Edmonds going down led to John Connor's resurgence. He had an excellent year with them statistically. But if I'm not mistaken, I think he missed the last 2 games of the year because he was banged up, as he tends to do. I don't think he's ever played a complete season in the NFL. So, I mean, as talented as he is, he's got to stay healthy. And if you're going to have key contributors leave, you're not going to win those tough games. And they play in a tough division again, and they have a tough AFC schedule this year because they're going to play the AFC West, a division who a lot of people are predicting all 4 teams are going to make the playoffs. So it's going to be about how long they can stay on the field together. I will say DeAndre Hopkins missing the first 6 games is not going to help. They are going to have a rough first 3 games. I believe they play the Rams, the Raiders, and someone else that was tough that I
Kansas City, week 1.
Chiefs.
Yeah.
So, look, I could see them starting 0-3 and having a lot of ground to make up. And, hopefully these guys can stay healthy. I love the Cardinals. I love watching them when they are healthy. They're a dynamic offense. Their defense is fun to watch. They make plays. They're a good football team. But I think also those injuries can be wearing on a team mentally, and it affected them last year. Mentally, I think even when some of those guys were back on the field in the playoffs, there was something in the head that seemed like they were already defeated. So we'll see. We'll see if they could stay in their right mind. We can see if they stay healthy. Hopefully, this is a good young team for years to come.
Yeah, and you have like the GM and the coach got extensions. They give Kyler the extension. Like this, Rick mentioned it before with the Rams locking in a core. Like the core for this team is essentially that trio of guys right there. It's the general manager that brought in this head coach, and the general manager and head coach that kicked Josh Rosen to the curb and got this quarterback number 1 overall. Which
rightfully so, mind you.
No, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying like that's these 3 are linked together. It's without a doubt. Like we were talking about it with the San Francisco 49ers just now. Like the next 4 to 5 years, it's going to be telling on how successful this trio was, without a doubt. So, to your point, Justin, like health is definitely a big thing. With DeAndre Hopkins now missing these first 6 games, it's going to be critical. How much can he continue his development of other guys? Maybe is it finally time for Andy Isabella to step up, because he's a guy that I think for a while. I want to think we maybe had conversations back when his draft happened, but I thought Andy Isabella could have been a good slot player for this team for so many years, and they just have not used him yet.
And now their big first round trade this year also.
Right, for Hollywood Brown as well. And maybe Hollywood Brown and Andy Isabella could be that duo that makes up for the loss of DeAndre Hopkins for 6 games. And of course, the great loss of Christian Kirk, that reverberates throughout the locker room very fondly. But they still have that running game. And of course, Kyler being the electric running quarterback that he is, he can still make plays with his legs as well. You have the offensive line that they did a lot of work on last season. The offensive line is still pretty good for the most part. And a defense that, yes, they did lose to Chandler Jones. I got to believe that they're hoping that somebody on that defense can take a step up. Remember the last 2 first rounds, or before this year, the previous 2 first rounds that they had, they drafted a couple defensive guys in Xavier Collins, who they hope can take a big leap this year. And as well as, why is the player's name just escaped my head? Simmons, I think. Isaiah Simmons was. So those are 2 defensive guys that they're hoping in some way could maybe take that big leap that we're expecting from them. Maybe that could happen this season, and maybe the Cardinals get lucky and both can happen. Who knows? But I think that this Cardinals team is certainly a team that is interesting. And so, Rick, I want to throw it to you before, like, the question to lead into your analysis with this team is, are the Cardinals, I would assume because of your 49ers analysis, for you, the Cardinals are the top, like, challenger to the Rams in this division. How real of a challenger are the Cardinals to the Rams for 2022?
It's obviously the Seahawks, man. What are you talking about? Look, this is why you brought in Hollywood Brown, because you knew you weren't going to have DeAndre Hopkins for 6 weeks to start the year. You needed a number 1 target, and AJ Green wasn't going to be the guy. But you also have Andy Isabella and Rondale Moore, who are going to be competing for that number one slot target, basically. Don't forget they still have Zach Ertz. For everything that Zach Ertz is, they still have him as their tight end. And yeah, I mean, look, is their offensive line the New York Giants of the West with Will Hernandez and Justin Pugh? Sure, fine. But bringing in, the guys that they have, and I'll tell you something, I love Cameron Thomas, who they drafted in the third round out of San Diego State. I think he could be a star. This is a team that's got a lot of young, talented defensive players. Budda Baker, Isaiah Simmons, Zaven Collins, Marcus Golden on the linebacking core. Devon Kennard is there too. This is a team that they needed to get Kyler Murray on the contract and on the books, and they did. Is it going to be the answer? I mean, look, I think they're a talented enough team, and maybe it's because of that hype, because of the pedigree they built last year, but this is a team that I think could challenge the Rams for the NFC West crown. I think this is a team that when everything is right and when the stars are aligned properly, I think this is a team that has the talent on the roster, on Jurg's favorite, the paper, to go toe-to-toe with the Rams talent-wise. Now, is it going to be the case? I don't think so. I mean, you could probably argue that they might challenge, they might take the crown, but it's hard to unseat the defending world champions. It really is hard to see that. But if anybody could do it based upon the talent that's on this roster, I say it's the Cardinals. I think it is. I mean, I think Kyler Murray is an upgrade on Trey Lance, and I think everything else for the most part is kind of a push. I mean, I think if you're talking about the Cardinals versus the 49ers, I think everything's a push except for that quarterback. And I think that quarterback room, you give the edge to Arizona. Does Kyler make a lot of mistakes? Sure. But he's also proven to play in big games, whereas Trey Lance, we're waiting to see that. That's the unknown known. You know that Kyler Murray can play in the big games. You don't know that about Trey Lance yet. And that's the biggest difference between the two teams in my eyes. And that's why I do have Arizona over San Francisco in my thought process.
Well, just for the big games part, because Kyler struggled in that playoff game. I'm not saying. Let me clarify. I'm not taking Trey Lance over him, but do we? I hate to put this on the guy because I feel like he gets a little too much sometimes. But can Kyler really play in the big games? He's had only one technically so far, and he got slaughtered.
Yeah, but when you go through Kyler's NFL history, the first season he was not great because he was sacked 48 times. Guy still threw for over 3,700 yards. Guy's still a consistent 4,000 yard, 3,850 yard passer. So he can still sling it with the rest of the quarterbacks that are in this league. And yeah, I mean, look, it's Arizona. You're not expecting a lot from Arizona when it comes to, playoff prowess. You brought in a firebrand in Cliff Kingsbury, and that's all well and good. But who's to say if they still had Bruce Arians there that Kyler wouldn't have gotten to a playoff bid? And maybe it's not so much the fact that your coaching is one thing; it's the fact that Kyler is a talented quarterback too. And so I think in that case, he's going to make the mistakes, but if you're going to compare Kyler to Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, it's not going to be the same comparison because Kyler's a bit of a different breed. Kyler Murray is a different type of animal when it comes to the fact is that I feel like he's a guy that, and you forget he's in his NFL regular season career, 70 touchdowns to 34 interceptions. That's still a better than 2-to-1 ratio. That's kind of the norm for what you want a quarterback to have. So, I mean, I feel like he's a step away. And when they get DeAndre Hopkins back in week 7, that game against New Orleans on that Thursday night, I know we say don't watch Amazon Prime, but that might be a game to watch potentially for DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown against the Saints defense. It might be a good game to watch. Just don't, because it's Amazon Prime.
So watch it, but don't watch it.
Right,
exactly. So watch the highlights that NFL puts on YouTube after.
Exactly, yes.
There we go. Just have to clarify that for the people.
Yeah.
No, it's certainly interesting. I mean, I think there's still plenty of talent on this team, to say the very least. And I think with that contract, it should hopefully the Cardinals are tied to this for a while. So with this commitment, they're going to be at it. So you got to hope for success. Like, I think I don't want to put the pressure on them like this, but I think after how last season ended, like they need to at least follow it up and be in the playoffs again, definitively. Like they need to follow up what was last season, and even if they lose a playoff game, I'm not going to put the pressure like they need to make it to the NFC Championship. Like, no, but if they make it back to the playoffs, they got to at least, like, they can't lose that game. What they lose 34-11 or something like that. You can't do that again, because then you start to ask a lot of questions, and maybe that contract buys them a little bit of time, but I would rather not have the questions need to be asked. I think like they should just try to get that business handled, to say the very least. So we're towards the end now. Rick, you kind of gave it to us, so we'll start with you because yours is going to be the easiest to run through. Your NFC West divisional standings for 2022 are?
I'm going to do this the same way that I did last week. And actually, I've kind of changed around a couple of things with what I'm thinking of. So I'm going to go bottom to top. Fourth place is Seattle for me. I was going to say my bold prediction was that if they don't win week 3 against Atlanta, they're not winning a game this season. I was going to have them going 0-17. However, in a little bit of odd thinking in an odd way, I have them going 1-16. So they're going to be the number 1 overall pick. The win I have them taking, which is my bold prediction, they beat Tampa in Germany. I have them beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Germany because I feel like it's just a perfect maelstrom of a scenario, the first ever NFL regular season game in Germany, to have them just have like a game where it's just ridiculous and have it be a terrible weather game in Munich and have them win in a battle of field goals, like 9-6. Something stupid like that, I think could be the case. So I have Seattle going 1-16, winning that game against Tampa, but I feel like they're going to trade everybody at the deadline as well, too. So they're my number 4 team. My number 3 team is San Francisco. And I've got them going 6-11. I have them going this year. I think it's a big drop off for them. And I believe kind of similar. I believe Deebo Samuel's traded at the deadline. I think that he's off this team by the midseason because I feel like Trey Lance is going to give him more problems than answers. And I think that Deebo is going to want out. I mean, he hasn't got the new deal to my knowledge yet. So, I mean, if he has, great. But like I said, those are smoke screens. With DK Metcalf, those are all smoke screens. So I feel like he's going to be out. Second seed, the Rams. The Rams are the second seed, 11-6. I have them taking a bit of a step back because, again, I don't think this is a team that cares about winning the division or being the number 1 overall seed. They're going to be 11-6. They're going to be a wild card team, and I think they do not bring back Beckham, but it's okay because Allen Robinson catches 10 touchdowns this season. I think Robinson becomes a stronger target for them, for Matt Stafford. But again, I think it's a team that they don't need to win the division. They don't need to be the number 1 overall seed because they're still going to be dangerous come playoff time. Because you talked about San Francisco last year, like how dangerous they were and how one interception away from going to the Super Bowl. A team can get hot at the right time, and in January, anything can happen. And so for me, that's where I go number 1. I believe this is the make or break year for Arizona. I have them going 12-5 and winning the division. I have 2 bold predictions. Number 1, they beat Kansas City in week 1. That's how they set the tone. They start off beating Kansas City in week 1. And number 2, by the end of the season, Cliff Kingsbury's fired. And Steve Kine, their GM, is also fired. Now, here's why. Steve Kine has a lot of other issues from a non-football perspective. And I think he's kind of on his last leg, if you will. To be blunt, the Steve Wilkes situation that was under him didn't really go the way that it should have. And I think that's a black mark. He had, I know it's 5 years ago, but he had an extreme DUI in 2018. And he was 0.19 was his blood alcohol content level, which was, triple the legal limit or whatever it is. I don't want to wish anything on somebody, but I think that there's going to be some back issues that are going to catch up to him. And I think that Cliff Kingsbury is fired because I feel like there's just going to be some kind of clashing of heads between him and the Bidwell family and the ownership of the Cardinals that I think is just going to result in him being gone. I think he might be the right guy, but but I feel like there's just too much of a personality clash that's going to really cost him at the end of the day. They'll win the division, but they'll lose the surprising. They will not win their playoff game, and it will be a second straight disastrous playoff game for them in the first round. I think if they're the 3, by my logic, they lose to Green Bay in the playoffs. And I think 2 in a row of bad games like that is also enough to cost them the job.
Much information, Rick.
Listen, I got to tantalize people to come back in next time.
He can also just switch it for all, like, he could go through his math and it's like, by the way, I did the tiebreaker well. So
yeah, listen, like DK Metcalf, I could be bluffing all of you for as long as I want. You never know. So Arizona 12-5, Rams 11-6, San Francisco 6-11, Seattle 1-16.
All right. Well, we had the Undertaker streak last week, and we got the reverse of that this week, which I'm trying to think of so we have the Kurt Hawkins streak this time for the Seattle Seahawks. So perfect. So I'll go real quick. So for me, number 1 seed Rams. I have them as my number 1 seed in this division. Will they be my number 1 seed in the conference? Who knows? But I definitely have them winning this division. I think even with San Francisco and Arizona, I just think the Rams are a cut above them. I think they're too good. I think there's too much talent there. And yes, while they may not care, I think they'll at least be able to win their division relatively easily. Like, I think there's a 2 to 3 game difference. Like, if the Rams have 13 wins, I think their second team in that division has 10 wins. Or if the Rams have 14, like if they actually go 14-3, like 10, 11 wins would be the second team to me. I just think like they're that many games above the other teams in their division. Well, at least the Cardinals and the 49ers. The Seahawks, they're way more than that. My second seed, because look, I'm going to put my faith in this man one last time, and if he scorns me here, then I guess I just need to stop believing in him. But I got the 49ers as my number 2 seed. I believe in Kyle Shanahan, and I think that the dude can work the offense in magical ways. And that defense, if they could just perform to the level we expect them to with some of the talents they have, I think we can get a pretty good season. I'm not going to predict a big season for Trey Lance, as someone likes to think I am, but I think the 49ers the expectation should be that they could still be a playoff team. And again, I think part of this is because I think the other divisions in the NFC, those teams just don't impress me enough. Like, I cannot definitively put them above the 49ers, because now we're talking about wild card teams. I can't put 3 wild card teams above San Francisco for myself right now. I just can't. And so that's my thing there. My number 3 seed, but tied with the 49ers. I have them as a tied record. For now, I have the tiebreaker going to San Francisco. Don't ask me why. I don't know what the tiebreaker math is. I'm not really going that much into detail. So I have the Cardinals being 10-7 as well. So like 49ers and Cardinals, I think could finish with the same record of like 10-7 apiece. And this is my ultimate reason why that I'm taking the Cardinals as my 3rd seed. Cliff Kingsbury, end of seasons. 2021 lost 5 of 6. 2020 lost 5 of 7. 2019 lost 7 of 9. That's with the Cardinals. 2018, now this is Texas Tech days. 2018 lost his last 5 games of the season. 2017 and 2016 lost 6 of his last 8. 2015 lost 4 of his last 6. 2014 lost 4 of his last 6. 2013 lost 5 of his last 6. This dude cannot coach the second half of the season. What the heck? There's one more thing that is
Pause.
What?
Pause.
What?
Why are you bringing Texas Tech into this?
Mm-hmm. Because it matters. Because to even show the greater sample size of the second half of the season, it doesn't matter the level, the quarterback, etc. He doesn't do good. I gave you 3 NFL seasons.
Yeah, but you do realize it's at towards the end of his Texas Tech career, he was playing Kyler Murray in Oklahoma.
Like that does as why am I forgetting his name? As Urban Meyer said, it's like I'm playing Alabama every single week. Like now you're playing that level of competition, and the trend still continues. And
don't invoke the name of Urban Meyer in this podcast.
I don't want to, but then if I have to prove my point, I will. I hate Urban Meyer.
Where's my contract?
It's in my lockbox. But yeah, I have the Cardinals as my 3rd seed, and I have the Seahawks as my 4th seed. Like, I'll be nice. I'll give them like 2 wins. I'll give them like 2-15, maybe 3-14. But that's just me. Justin, you finish it out with your standing.
Well, big surprise. I also have the Seahawks at 2-15. It's gonna be a long year. I got hope for them actually next year. I do believe in the people they have in place that are going to put together this team, even though they traded for Jamal Adams. It hasn't worked out for them. But I do think that they have hope in the future, just not the recent future. In 3rd place, I have the Niners. Just by virtue of a young, inexperienced quarterback. I don't necessarily think they're going to win some of those close games that really boost that record for you. So I do have them being decent. I think they're going to go 7-10, possibly 8-9. They'll squeak out some good wins against good teams, but I don't necessarily see them challenging for that third wild card spot this year. Um, in second place, I will have the Arizona Cardinals, and they're going to be better than the 49ers, but not by a wide margin. I have them at 9-8. Again, it is going to be a really difficult season. They're going to start out with a handicap. I know they traded for Marquise Hollywood Brown, and they're going to have 4 legitimate receivers there if Andy Isabella could step up, because AJ Green still had a really good year last year. He's back with the team. Um, Marquise Hollywood Brown is there. DeAndre Hopkins is always going to be one of the best receivers in football if he could stay healthy and stay on the field. So without him being there and without Chase Edmonds being there, I don't necessarily know if they're going to be able to make up that ground, especially with a tough, really tough first 3 games. So I think that they're going to be 9-8, possibly 10-7, but I'm not really giving them that edge yet. And there's no reason for me why the Rams should be any worse than they were last year. I'm going to have them at 12-5. I think that they're the cream of the crop of the NFC. They could show up any day against any team and have a legitimate shot to win. And I don't think much has changed in this offseason to prove otherwise. As much as I like their signings, they are veteran guys, some guys that haven't necessarily performed in recent years. So I think a lot of their hype is coming from big name players as opposed to talent. But that being said, they still have a ton of talent on that roster. They should still be the top team in that division. And even with a tough schedule, I expect double-digit wins. So I have them at 12-5.
As such, and the Rams, like the Rams are one of the rarefied air teams that we have that any given week, like they could definitively get the win. Like we like to always say any given Sunday, but like the Rams are the definition of like, hey, any week they can step on the field and they'll beat you. And the Rams are a team where you can give them your best and you could still lose that game. That's how talented they are. And not a lot of teams are really like that. I don't think even this season, we talked about a lot of good teams. I think the Rams are one of the few teams that it's like you could give them the very best. You could play the best game you could, and they could beat you.
And they could beat you in a lot of different ways. They could beat you offensively. They could beat you defensively. They could even beat you special teams with returns and playing great field goals and all that stuff. So they're good in all 3 facets of the game.
Yeah, and they could also they could beat you not playing their best. They could play 80% of their full potential, and you could play your best, and they could still beat you. Like that's the level of talent that they're at right now. So
yeah, they could beat the Seahawks at 60% probably.
Well, maybe even less. But that being said, that recaps the final division we've gone through. Like I said, next episode we will give our full playoff pictures. I don't know if we're going to give playoff predictions. We actually haven't even decided that, so you guys will figure that out on the next episode if we're going to do that as well. But in the meantime, as per usual, the dessert of the episode, because we've been going with food this entire time, so I might as well finish it off. The dessert that is sure to send everybody home happy. Rick, you take it from here. The roast podium. Let's go.
I also thought to myself, maybe I could have the Cardinals win the division by not beating the Rams at all, like having them lose both games to the Rams and then still winning the division that way, just for the heck of it. But I'll save that for maybe my thought for next week and whatever. Okay. Honorable mention for this week's podium. I'm not sure if you heard about the story in Russia with this chess tournament that was going on. There was apparently in Russia they decided, let's have the robots play in this chess tournament against actual humans. Well, a robot mistook a 7-year-old's finger for an actual pawn and tried to grab it and broke the kid's finger. So it's official. It is official. The robots are coming for us, and the nerds are going to be the first ones to fall. So somebody go save Bill Gates, not Jeff Bezos. He can, go drown in the small lake, whatever the case is. So regardless, moving on. That's honorable mention, though. Number 3, I say it all the time. Duncan sucks. I have a legitimate reason, though, here. So one of the things they never tell you, or they tell you never to do when it comes to writing papers or assignments, is copying and pasting and plagiarizing. Someone should have told us to the Cranston, Rhode Island, Duncan, where it said, I quote, they copy-pasted an offer that offered free coffee to their residents. They copy and pasted this offer from White Plains, New York. Now, if that doesn't give you a clue as to where I'm going with this, the ad said, and I quote, free coffee to all white Cranston, Rhode Island residents. Duncan sucks. Don't copy and paste anything. Please. Make sure that when you're actually writing a paper, you put originality into it. That's why they have Turnitin. It's a very important thing that we should have Turnitin for our lives now. That way it's everyone's original, not just blasting out other people's thoughts like crazy. It'll be stupid that way. Number 2, I want to go a little high fashion here, gentlemen. I'm going to go with Christian Dior as my rant of the week. Now, if you haven't heard the story about this, they have apparently now a skirt in their Paris stores that is drawing comparisons to something that was from a historic Chinese culture. It's called a horse face skirt. It's a skirt made of like pleated wool and mohair. So cultural appropriation aside, because that's a topic that people who wear suits for a living can actually like discuss. I want to talk about the cost of this skirt and why I really have a problem with high fashion. This skirt comes in at $3,800. That's a down payment for a car, basically. $3,800 for a skirt you wear once and can't even take to the dry cleaner because they'll mess it up because it's mohair. Like, really? This is high fashion now? You want to buy a Christian? Like, I will wear $3,800 worth of meat. Like Lady Gaga's meat suit. I'll wear that instead of this skirt. Like, really? Come on now. That's awful. Like, Christian Dior. At a high fashion in total, if it's too expensive for me, it's too expensive for thee, so change it completely. Done. Simple. Easy. Number 1, I want to play the first ever Rostrum Podium Spelling Bee, gentlemen. So, everyone, unmute your microphones. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you how to spell a certain city. Ready? Spell Albuquerque.
No.
Albuquerque.
There's an actual reason for this.
Well, I feel like the reason is because there's a Q in there and someone spelled it without the Q.
No. So, the way you spell Albuquerque is ALBUQUERQUE, which for us living in New York or anywhere else inside of Mexico, you're forgiven, right? If you don't know how to spell that. When you're not forgiven is when you're the New Mexico Department of Transportation putting up a brand new road sign and misspelling the name of arguably the biggest city in your state. Now, Jerk, to your point, they did not forget a Q. They forgot the R. So instead, it was Albuquerque.
Wow.
Instead of Albuquerque. You forgot the R. First of all, again, it's your own state. It's maybe the biggest city in your state. It's a road sign that's on an interstate highway. How do you not know how to spell a city in your own state? This is why our education system is failing us here, because you cannot live in a certain state and spell a city name properly. Now, listen, anybody who's not from Long Island will look at Ronkonkoma and say it Ronkonkoma, or look at any of the cities out east and say, like, what is Quogue? It's Quag, by the way. Quag, not Quahog, Quag. But Albuquerque, if you're living in the state, if you're from that state initially, you should know how to spell the name of that city. Like, it's just common knowledge. And the fact that you don't, and the fact that we're hiring people who don't know how to spell a city that, I bet you one of those guys actually lives in that city. And that's how he thinks he spells it. Like, really? Guys, Department of Transportation in Mexico? Really? You do better. World, do better. Duncan still sucks.
We played all the hits there. Wow. Per usual, me and Justin don't really know how to follow that up.
We covered everything except strange animals.
True. That's probably for next week. Rick has to space it out a little bit.
Yeah, I'll have 5 random platypus facts for next week.
I'd actually be down with that. I'm all for that.
Yeah,
I can't. It's going to be so ironic if a platypus story actually breaks before next week, and we actually do have that. Like, that just lets you know that the world is working for this podcast. And speaking of working for this podcast, another episode.
platypusdaily.com next week for all that.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of working for the podcast, yet another just banger of an episode. The NFC West is done. The divisions are done. Next up is the playoffs, and we go from there because the season is coming soon, ladies and gentlemen. But we'll have a little bit more fun planned here. Yes, because his setup completely died, but Sandoval is back, ladies and gentlemen, with a vengeance. Not happy that his power went out for some reason. But guys, thank you all so much for joining us this week. Thank you for joining us on this journey so far. We finished all the divisions. We have plenty more football to come in future weeks. Because like we always say, on a weekly basis here on the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, we love to have fun. We love to talk football. And we love to spread Just a little bit of chaos. Thank you all so much for joining us. And as always, we will see you